look at me. Hello there, I'm Callum and welcome back to the EU in Review, where I review the Star Wars Expanded Universe as I experience it. And this time I'm finally getting around to doing my review of Dawn of the Jedi, Force Storm. So Dawn of the Jedi, Force Storm was released in 2012. It was written by John Ostrander and Jan DeSima, and Jan DeSima did the pencils, so it did a lot of main art, and then others did the colouring in that. I really loved this overall, really loved it. The plot was really cool. I'm really interested because it really gives a summary of how the origin of the Jedi began, which is missing from the Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void novel, because I've read that before. And general setup of explaining everything that's done before and all that is awesome. I really love it. And the ideas in it, I love the ideas. I love all of the diversity of the different alien characters in it. How it's not just humans, it's all sorts of species. And, well, generally the whole thing. I love it, love it, love it. Oh, I can't fault the plot at all. The dialogue is reminiscent of a different type of dialogue, but I think that's really cool because you have enough of it to go, this is Star Wars, but also it's a different time period, so they would talk differently. And I really love the history bits they get in with that. The writing style, I really enjoyed it. I didn't feel like the pacing was off at all. It felt like it was just the right pacing to introduce new things, and pretty much felt like it was just an adventure the whole way along. It hinted at things to come for future Dawn of the Jedi series, and then also keeping a bit of mystery around things, which I think is really cool. The visuals are amazing. I love the art in this comic. It is brilliant. I especially love how all of the different alien species are drawn working together, and the real step up of the art, especially after just reading the old Marvel comics. How much the art has progressed over the years, and how Dark Horse really spurred the comics forward in the art, and the writing and everything is brilliant to just sort of jump to. I know this was released a lot later than the Marvel stuff, but at the same time it's like, wow, it's amazing to see how much difference Dark Horse made when they made the comics, especially in the direction it's gone compared to the old Marvel comics. Continuity, I do not see any errors in continuity at all. It's perfection with that. And it's really cool. I really enjoy it, and it's great. I also really like how they have a bit of an introduction at the start to give you a bit of context. It's like the opening crawl on the first issue, and then a bit of a summary of what's happened before in the following issues, which is really cool. That was the spoilerless review. I really love it. It's definitely worth checking out, especially since it really covers the origins of the Jedi, and really starts going straight into when they started off the era with, this is the important events that we want to know about, the origins of the Jedi. It's awesome. Now I get into my notes that I take as I've read it. So issue 1 is, I love the cover art on all of these as well, just by the way. I also love the cover art, it's great. They have the Jedi Oath in the front of the book, actually, which is cool to read because it differs from the later Jedi Code that we see in the EU. They immediately, the narration hits with really cool info about the Dai Bendu being a group that basically worship the Thoyor, because I didn't know much about the Dai Bendu before. I sort of knew the name, but not much about what they actually did, because I've been not looking up stuff more recently as well, and just reading firsthand all of the things, so that's new information to me, which is awesome. And The Thoyor turns out to be a floating diamond-shaped vessel, which is like a pyramid, but like both ends are diamonds, which is interesting. It's a cool-looking design for a ship, but I wonder, where did the Thoyor come from? How did this come about that they sent these vessels into the galaxy to be able to detect people with the potential for being Jedi or Force sensitives, basically? And of course it will be in response to the Rakata back in this time. As I read more as well, that becomes more apparent. It's really cool how it goes to different places and species that the Thoyor calls. They call it calling, but basically they search for Force sensitives that they reach out in some way with the Force to call them all together and take them to the planet of Tython, which no one has actually discovered before, apparently, in this certain circumstance. And then they all come together and they're called Typhons as well, which I thought was interesting. I wondered if they could somehow interbreed, but I think there's still too much species deviation. So what I was thinking of with that is when the population is taken to a certain place, after a while you will get a lack of genetic diversity, which may cause them problems in the future. But I guess they weren't there long enough to really encounter that problem. But spoilers for the next series. Jedi is a Dai-Bendu word, so Jedi is a Dai-Bendu word for mystic center, which I think is a really cool origin for the name, and especially how they have the balance between the Ashla and the Bogan, because when they go to Tython, and you understand that this is their interpretation of balance of the Force, is that they go to Tython and the weather, when it's out of balance, too much to the light side and too much to the dark side, the weather reacts. Usually when it's too much to the dark side, when we see in these comics, there's huge force storms and everything, which is actually really cool. And so the Jedi build their belief system based off of the Tython weather. The Tython weather, I should say. And what I really like about that is that it leads to a logical conclusion, rather than just, oh, we believe this because of some mystical thing. It's a logical conclusion to go, well, that happened, we feel it in the Force, it's been causing problems, so we need to make sure we balance out the light and the dark, with the Ashla and the Bogan being the two moons. And there's even Sith among the Jedi, which it goes into a bit later as well with one of the journeyers. But the Sith species, of course, is a separate redskin species to what became the Sith as a religion, I would call it, a belief, following the Sith code. And so there's even Sith Jedi. So I think at one point there was someone that was asking a question somewhere about if there could be Sith that are Jedi. Well, there's plenty in Dawn of the Jedi. And it's awesome to see that, like, no species is inherently evil. And so you really get an interesting, different look into the real diversity of the Jedi in this time. I think it's interesting that they built the temples around the Thoyor, because the Thoyor sort of just stay on Tython after they drop them off. So it seems like they planted themselves into Tython, sort of. Like, they hovered around when they dropped them off, but then they sort of planted themselves and became the temples, and then they put buildings around them and all that. It's interesting how there are beings born that actually can't use the Force in this. So it really shows how, no matter how strong you are in the Force with your bloodline, it really doesn't make much difference to your offspring, because it is really, I guess you would say, the will of the Force for if you are actually Force sensitive or not. Because these were all Force sensitives that were picked by the Thoyor to go to Tython, and yet when they had children, there were a bunch of them that were not Force sensitives. So I think that's a really interesting observation, and it also caused a split, showing the history, with the Despo Wars, which I think was really cool. On the Thoyor temples and that, it looks like the Galactic Empire symbol. or very similar to it, which I thought was funny. And yeah, they say about the Jedi Code in it. They go through it, and this is what it is. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no fear, there is power. I am the heart of the Force, I am the revealing fire of the light. Revealing fire of light. I am the mystery of darkness in balance with chaos and harmony. Immortal in the Force. Which is a really cool code to go by. But that's where I think people get a grey Jedi type of mentality from. This is the most official to a grey Jedi code you would get. And I would call this a more grey mindset, with people saying their point of view with grey Jedi of this is a balance between light and dark. Inevitably, the understanding of the Force changes as the Jedi evolve, and so you get the modern Jedi code and the modern Sith code, which are in stark contrast to each other. But at the time, this was when they had a completely different understanding of the Force, from mainly just the weather on Tython, and how they would balance it so that they would actually survive, rather than just going, oh, we need to be all light side. And I thought it was really interesting when they started talking about the Despo War. As the first Despo was the one who rose against the Jedi and didn't want to submit to their will, or the will of the Force. An albino Twi'lek named Shikakwa. And I thought that was really interesting how you had the Jedi thinking that they were right and everything, trying to force everyone else to follow their belief system, and it not working out and causing a war. And I think that's actually really cool and realistic, and makes for a good conflict, especially later on. How it explores some different points of views of characters that have been through the Despo War, and all of that. It was really interesting to me. And they go to the flashbacks of the Despo War with the fights depicted with metal swords and not lightsabers. And yes, they have not invented lightsabers yet. And so it's really interesting to see the fights that way. And it's also great, again, to see the diversity of all of the aliens that are part of the Jedi Order. And of course, it would inevitably be on the other side, on the Despo Shikakwa. And it was interesting how they did all of this history bit, where it was all of a summary of the history told to children as they were growing up. I think that was a great way of doing it. And it really went, okay, so this is where the story sort of starts, but you needed this background knowledge of how the Jedi began, because we don't want to just jump into it. Don't want the Jedi into the void. Anyway, it's really good. And that's, I think, why you need to read the comics along with before you read the novel a bit, because then you get that bit of background. And it shows Tatooine when it was a lush world and what the Rakata did to it, which I thought was really interesting. With a new named character, Zesh, as an antagonist, shown at least at this point. Well, it sort of swaps to his point of view, and then throughout the series we follow him as sort of the antagonistic force that we're looking at, but then also it swaps to what is needed as far as points of view and what, and they do it in a really good way when they swap back and forth. A Force Hound in servitude to Praedor Tulkar of the Rakata, because at this time in Dawn of the Jedi, the Rakatan Infinite Empire isn't completely gone yet. It may be on the downhill incline, but it's not gone. And so we have Praedor Tulkar and the other Rakatans having all the Force Hounds and everything that they raised up and did everything with. And it's really awesome to see Rakata after the hints and hints of it in SWTOR and in some other material, that we actually get to see them. It's really awesome. The Rakatans seem to be selecting certain people and killing them for some reason. They sort of suck out their essence as I looked at it, and that's what it looked like in the art. And then they eat it, but then they also seem to eat the people as well. It's like, oh, wouldn't want them as enemies. It really shows the power of the Rakata when he appears bored, electrocuting one of the guys that speaks up. Of course, the guy is not a Force sensitive or whatever, but he's just like, yeah, whatever, I'm electrocuting you. With no effort at all to produce the electricity. And interesting how similar to the modern Sith they made the Rakatans and how they act. And of course that speaks to the nature of the dark side, and that's the way the dark side works, is when you're steeped in the dark side and you're following the dark side, whatever your code may be, you actually have similarities in behaviour that all make a common thread between, we know that these are the bad guys and this is the dark side, which is really good. It has Biss as well, and Biss first appeared in Dark Empire, but also really connects Biss into the Rakatans and how it was a place where they trained the Force Hounds. It's really cool. And the Rakatan base looks a lot like the Starforge, I thought. I'm like, it most likely is the Starforge, or they made similar looking vessels. Then it introduces Trill, another Force Hound, and Tulkar's Praetor. Tulkar is the name of the Rakatan, and then Praetor must be the word for master. And there's a cool dynamic there where even the Rakatans have their own masters, but they also have their own apprentices underneath them with the, well, sort of apprentices, but mainly just tools for them to use in the Force Hounds. And the first clash of Force Sabers we see between Trill and Zesh is really cool. And it ends with Zesh saying that he can find the world, in which they mean Tython, and lead them to it to conquer. And so we know that they're on a time scale then, that the antagonistic force is going to be coming, and inevitably we will see the Jedi versus the Rakatans, and it'll be really awesome. Issue 2, the cover is awesome. What really stood out to me with this is the flying Rancor. I'm like, flying Rancors? What? And it's really awesome. I love how also this gives more of a fantasy type feel to Star Wars than what more material around the original trilogy does, and really gives it that sort of mythical feel to it. That's good. The ship's crew outfits remind me of the Empire, but without any insignias on it, for whatever reason. We get a setup of what it looks like, and a named Jedi Ranger sensing things in the Force that others can't. I mean, as they do, because they're Force sensitive. The Ranger is on the ship of non-Force sensitives, so yeah. It's cool how it goes into Jedi alchemy a bit, with the creeping Rancor Dragon. It's called a Rancor Dragon, the flying Rancor. And it's what's shown on the cover, and it's awesome, and I want one. It's awesome. Of course, I have trouble trying to calm it down. At least Shay does at the start, but then it shows the character progression with, as they've introduced Shay Coda, which is one of the 3 special journeys that it's called in the Force. And it's a cool fight between a Calic assassin and a Jedi, where she uses the Force to amplify her fists. So that's basically a basic strength amplification, but it's really cool because we see it in a really cool way done with the perspective of how the Jedi at this time had learnt how to use their powers versus how it had become later in the saga. I'll call it all the saga, all of the movies and the EU. It shows the different Jedi getting visions of Zesh, so it shows Seknos, which is one of the Sith species. It shows Tasha Rio, which is a Twi'lek, and then it also has Shay Coda with the Rancor Dragon, getting visions of Zesh, which is really cool. It's interesting how it shows a tension between what Tasha Rio's father wants, having her in service to Clam Rio, versus her staying neutral and being more of an unbiased Jedi, and that does go into that a little bit more later on, and I'm interested to see if it becomes a plot point between Tasha and her father and something happening there where they don't really seem keen on the Jedi. So it's really interesting to see that dynamic. And it goes to Seknos, who appears to be the first one to be playing around and learning how to create a ball with Force lightning and then shoot it off. And he's sort of the arrogant one, so that's pretty cool how we get different personalities between them as well. It's interesting how it shows how much focus he needs to be able to do it. They all come together, and it ends with a cool cliffhanger with Zesh unmasked from a crashed ship, standing before the 3 Jedi journeyers. So they're not full rangers yet, but they're training, so they're basically Padwans. The Jedi journeyers from different places and fields of study coming together in the Force, and Zesh coming out going, "I'ma fight you," basically.
So, you have chosen death.
Issue 3 opens up with Master Ketu and a female, Ranger Fen, which is pretty cool, different ones. They mention a Science Master, which I guess would be particular fields of study for the different temples, and they do go around and do that, where they have different fields of study, like one's a temple for healing, then another temple studies more the martial arts and all that stuff, so it's pretty cool. There's a great fight where they're getting beaten to a pulp by Zesh, basically, and then has a turning point of Seknos stealing the Force Saber, throwing it to Shay Coda, and then Shay obviously must have a lot of darkness inside of her to be able to activate the saber, and it's really cool because it turns the tide. And then, of course, that sort of ends that fight, but Zesh flees into the void, and they have rift creatures which look like giant space worms for whatever reason. It's pretty awesome. I love the artistic ways displayed and how that goes. And Tython reacts to the deaths of the Force sensitives that crash with Zesh to create a natural Force storm. So of course Praedor Tulkar was on that ship, but that crashed into Tython, and because there was death and they were steeped in the dark side, that upset the natural balance of Tython because it's so sensitive to the Force for whatever reason at this point in time. And so we get a giant Force storm appearing because of that. And it's cool, nice to know that Butch, which is what Shay called the Rancor Dragon, has survived because I didn't want it to die. It's mad from pain at first until Shay's master calms him. That's actually pretty cool. I like that. How it's actually displayed as a creature with natural instincts. And of course, the 3 Jedi journeyers jump into the void after Zesh to take him out. Even though they build up this thing of how if you go into the void, you'll go mad and all that. It's basically like the Dark Side Cave on Dagobah, but on a much higher level. Which it goes into in issue 4, which is Shay and Tasha are confronted by the dark side, and it tries to engulf them by bringing out their fear and anger in connection to both of their parents, which is actually pretty cool. I really enjoy that. And it's like, oh damn, Zesh actually killed Praedor Tulkar and the other crew on the ship before it crashed, and it was an interesting reveal because he doesn't know why he did it. It was just based on instinct, and then that leads to what I guess later could be a redemption arc, but I don't know enough about the character to say that, and this is just me guessing because it ends up bringing in a lot more of him questioning himself later on in Prisoner of Bogan, which I'm reading at the moment, and all that stuff. So he wakes up to spiders webbing him up, so there's basically giant spiders, which is fun, and then he's basically just like, well, I'm just going to electrocute everything and fry out the webs. As you do. He's then confronted by what he's done. The Abyss, as I said before. They call it the Abyss, sorry, I called it the Void, the Abyss. Same thing. It's basically like a big Dagobah cave, which is a bit deeper in the dark side, I think. It's really cool to see the Beastmaster riding the Rancor Dragon. I love it. And while the others ride a dinosaur around, so there must be dinosaurs on Tython. And it looks awesome. And they really went for a real mythical look with it, basically. And it's really cool. And Zesh having flashbacks to arena fights on Biss as a Force Hound is actually really cool. I really enjoy all these flashbacks that Zesh has because it builds his character and shows what his life was like. I also like how they connect Biss in, since the residual power there would be a reason Sidious would use the planet in Dark Empire. And it's nice how the group saves Zesh from what's called a Sasau, which is a rift worm, which I called it a space worm before, but they're called rift worms. And it can breathe lightning, which is pretty awesome. And I love the end panel, it's badass with all the good stuff, so you'll see it. And issue 5, it's really cool how it shows Zesh watching the 3 struggle against the Sassal and try to draw conclusions based on how he fights, but he's trying to go, okay, this is what they'll do next, this is what this person will do next, based on all of his own experiences. And then they do something completely opposite, and he's like, what? Mind blown, why are these not fighting like I would fight? That's best for survival of yourself. But when you're a Jedi, you're thinking of other people, of course. And it's really cool to see the clear comparison and differences shown through that. And there's a cool panel showing the variety of species in the Jedi Temple Masters. So one temple is basically one species, but of course, depends who wants to study the arts. It's really cool how it shows that. And it's interesting how Master Quan Zhang, which is Shakoda's master, has a battle in the Force with the Storm as more of the finale than a physical battle, which is actually pretty cool. So he's battling the elements that come from the Force Storm that came up. And Shay almost kills Zesh, but spares him in the end, as he does talk about her having the honor portion of his body when she eats him. And it's like, what? Why would I eat someone? Basically. So that probably puts her off. Because that whole thing is a whole thing of him saying that and then her going, well, this guy's messed up. What happened to him? Maybe we can actually help him because he's obviously believes something so different to what we do. And it just so happens that the Self-Cat Temple is a temple of healing. And Manan is the source of Kolto in the Old Republic with the Self-Cat. At least the master of that temple is a Self-Cat that they show. It's interesting how Zesh doesn't even know what a healer is because they have no healers among Rakata. And there's a whole different thing with that. And it's really awesome panel of what looks like the Starforge in action because it shows the Starforge and then all the ships around it. It looks really awesome. And it ends with Zesh being deemed too dangerous to the balance and being sent to Bogan, where I assume he will meet Dagon Locke because they hint at Dagon Locke throughout this but don't really follow him closely. And that will be cool. So overall, it's really awesome. I'm really enjoying this. I'm keen because I'm currently sort of in the middle of Prisoner of Bogan, and it's really awesome. I really enjoy these comics and they're definitely worth reading. Origin of the Jedi, in summary at least, is really good to get for this. And then more Rakata and what the Rakata was actually like was actually really cool. So yeah, overall, love it, read it. It's awesome. So thank you guys for watching. That's all I have for you today. Don't forget you could subscribe for more EU reviews for when I actually read them. And you can comment down below what you thought of Dawn of the Jedi Force Storm. Do you enjoy it as much as I do? So thank you guys again, and I'll see you in the next video. Hooray! 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 Hooray!